Okay, this is my science notebook. I have the name on the front, and you'll notice that I put volume 1 because lots of times just throughout the school year you'll need 2 volumes, and so this keeps track of which volume it is. On the inside I put directions on how to actually use the notebook, and I put a title page. Next you can put a table of contents, and that's very much up to the teacher as to how they want to do that. Sometimes you'll put the page numbers and the dates of all the entries. Other things you could do instead would be to put tabs for each unit, and you'll see how I took a sticky note and just folded it over the edge. You could use little pieces of construction paper and do the same thing. You could just be creative on how you want to identify where certain things are in your notebook, and students can go quickly back into that. Another thing you could do is to put a ribbon. I don't have an example of this, but if you glued a ribbon to the back and then used it as a bookmark, and they could keep place there also. These are just examples of some notes that I've taken, and using color and always putting a heading at the top of the page is good so that you have a title and know what it is that you've been talking about. A notebook should have data in it, and if you have a worksheet or a page that you want to put in but you don't really want to take up a sheet of your notebook, just glue one edge of it and glue it close to the binding of the notebook, and that way you can still have writing on both pages, but you also have your worksheet there. These are just examples of things that I've done. Here's another tab. Color is nice, but it's not absolutely necessary, and a way that you could use any kind of a worksheet would be to make flaps out of it, and underneath these flaps you could put information. This is an example of 4 different articles that students were given to read and to research, and they put notes underneath the flap for that particular article. This is an example of another type of foldable that you could create. A lot of times if you will shrink down the copy, and when you're making your copies, if you shrink it, you can make smaller pieces of paper. This is another example of a foldable. These are assessment ideas, but you would start with a full sheet of paper with the upper left-hand corner actually cut out, and then you just fold it so that you make the pages, and then glue the back of it into your notebook. You can always just put sticky notes on a page. Here's another example of making flaps and putting information underneath it. That's a good way for the kids to go back and review themselves. They see the main topic on the outside of the flap, and then they can say the information to themselves and then check themselves by looking under the flap. This is an example of making a flap with 2 pieces of paper. You just fold over the top sheet and then glue it at the bottom and on the side up to where you folded, and then that makes a nice little flap where you can put in whatever information. You could also glue an envelope into your notebook, and then that makes another little pocket where you could put some cards or that type of thing. This is an example of a Frayer model where you start out with a piece of paper and just cut up to the about halfway, then fold it into fourths and just label it as Frayer model on the outside, and then when you open it up, you have these 4 sections where you could put your word in the middle, the definition, typical examples, non-examples, and any unusual examples over on the corner. So that's just another way of doing some vocabulary. At the back of my notebook, I have several different ideas. Taking clear plastic tape, you could tape a Ziploc bag into your notebook, and then that leaves you with a really secure place to put materials that you want to make sure that the kids have access to. Another thing you could do is to put a small manila envelope And be sure that you don't glue all the way over to the edges, because then it's difficult for them to get their hands in if you glue all the way to the edges. And one of the most important things is any gluing that you do, make sure that you say dot, dot, not a lot with your glue, because if you get too much glue, it gets real messy. And so again, dot, dot, not a lot.